One of the things we're going to try to figure out in this episode of the conversation is how in the world do we reach rural voters with Democratic and progressive policy positions? Democrats have not done a very good job of reaching rural voters. If you've ever looked at an electoral college map, you will see that as a matter of mass, the country is largely red, and that is because so much of our larger counties that are very rural go towards Republicans. The major cities go towards Democrats. Well, don't worry, we got a guy on here who's gonna help us try to figure it out. It's JD Scholten. He ran against Steve King and almost beat him in a district that was plus 27 for the Republicans. JD came in within 3 points of beating one of the worst congressmen in the country, Steve King, in Iowa. So now he's become the executive director of ruralvote.org. JD, welcome back to the show.
Honored to be back here.
Oh, thank you, brother. So let's get to it, okay? How? How do we reach rural voters in America with, and both the Democratic and the progressive positions, because they're not exactly the same.
Yeah. Well, I think one of the biggest things is we see that it's showing up, and what we've seen, and this is so much from just on my campaign, going out to all 39 counties and just meeting folks where they're at, is that the majority of the folks are with us on policies, but they're not there with us when it comes to actual voting for us. And so there's this big, large disconnect, and the brand is really bashed right now. And so the first thing that we need to do is improve the brand. The other part of it is we got to get our message out. And when we're seeing everyone just doesn't watch the nightly news like they did 20, 30 years ago. And so people are getting their message and their information from all over the place. But then one of the number one places they are getting it is from Facebook. And if you look at the top 10 things that are on Facebook every single day, 7 out of 10, and often 10 out of 10 are some of the most right-wing things you'll see. And so we got to be there and battling in those spaces where voters are at. And so to us, that's a huge project that we're looking to do. And really what this project is kind of two-pronged. It's bringing the Democratic Party to rural areas, but it's also bringing the rural areas to the Democratic Party.
Okay, well, that's interesting, JD. So look, that's this deeply frustrating part, what you just mentioned there, which is that if you look at the polling, first of all Americans, but definitely rural Americans, agree with progressive policy positions. But when you look at the voting, they're not with us at all. So let's talk about that giant disconnect. What do you think is the root cause, specifically for rural voters, as to why they're voting Republican, even though they agree with us on policy?
I think it goes back to the mis and disinformation. It's one of the biggest things that I see out there. And when I went out on the campaign trail and talked just policy, and people would nod their heads, go stop at these small diners and these gas stations, and then they're like, "Oh, you're a Republican, right?" And you're like, "No, I'm a Democrat." And then you just see this look on their faces, "What is that?" type of thing. And so one of the things I wanted to do was we did a poll about 2 months ago, a month and a half ago, that got some traction because it was what I felt we were doing during the campaign and seeing on the campaign that the national narrative just isn't picking up. And the first thing we did was just with the stimulus checks, the $1,400 stimulus checks. Was it from President Biden and his administration, or was it from Trump and previous or another? And only 50% of rural voters thought it was from Joe Biden, and 39% thought it was Trump. And so you see, even when we pass things and progressive things, it's not getting to these people. And so we got to find messengers. And so that's a huge part of it. So then we decided to test out candidates. And we did this just very generic candidate that we thought stereotype what a rural folks would like for a candidate. And we put them against a coastal, I think, multimillionaire who wants to give tax breaks to the super wealthy. And our generic candidate won by 35%. We put a D by its name and asked the question again, and the person lost by 1. So that's a 36-point margin. And with Democratic policies, we see are extremely popular, and progressive policies are extremely popular with these folks. But then you put a D by it and it drops dramatically. And so that's the biggest thing. And you look at, I see so much in just my area of the country, there's the county called Carroll County, Iowa. And in 2008, it voted for Obama. And then this last election in 2020, it voted for Trump at 71%. And where I live and where Carroll County is, the state House member, the state senator, the governor, the member of Congress, and both senators, all Republicans. We have to get the Democratic message and the progressive message out to these folks. And so that's one of our huge programs that we're going to be working on is creating brand ambassadors to help local folks talk about national issues where they're at and to get that and amplify it and get some local influencers. And that's one of the biggest things we need to do is show, no, Democratic policies are good and this is why they're good and this is how they'll help here.
Yeah, oh boy, good luck. So, no, because some of those stats are super depressing. I mean, I have 1,000 problems with Joe Biden. I talk about it on the show every day, but did he pass the COVID relief bill that got him the $1,400 checks? Well, that's not a policy question. That's not a opinion question. That's just a fact. Of course it was right. Biden, right? And no, 39% say no, it was Trump. Because JD, they don't care about your stinking facts. So we've got to dig deeper into the core of the issue here because, and the other curveball, if you will, JD used to be a professional baseball player, is that, man, just a couple of elections ago, they voted for Obama. Now they're voting for Trump at 71%. So if it's not the policy, JD, you've got to tell us, what is it? How did the Republicans and Trump in particular get a mind lock on people where they don't even care about facts anymore and they don't care about policy, they don't care about punching themselves in the face? They're just like, no, I'm gonna vote Republican no matter what. I don't care what you tell me. You could tell me that I'm gonna get $1 million, I'm still gonna vote Republican, I don't care.
Well, I will push back a little bit, and I think the Democratic Party has to look in the mirror and say, we lost a populist fight to a New York billionaire in 2016. And I don't think that part gets brought about it enough. Now, you look at the history of kind of why I'm a progressive is my roots are with the prairie populists, with the Tom Harkins, the Berkeley Bedells, the Paul Wellstones, and so that's kind of where I come from. But it's also we really lost touch with that and that lineage. But this goes back to our rural problem. 20 years ago, we had the Senate Majority Leader, a Democrat from South Dakota. We had the Democrats in North Dakota and Nebraska, Iowa, Indiana, and all those seats are up this year, and Missouri, and all those seats are up this year. And not too many people think we have a chance in any of those situations. And so how did we get there in the last 20 years? And then you look at from Obama to today, in 12 years, the biggest difference in politics in 12 years is social media and mis and disinformation. And so one of the projects we have for ruralvote.org and what we're trying to do, we have a 2022 plan and we have a long-term plan. And the long-term plan is to build this national network of rural folks who are trying to improve their communities and try to get blue in the future. But the 2022 plan, and this goes back to the poll a little bit too, and the poll showed that there's about 55% of rural battleground voters who we're not going to get. You mentioned D, and they're just gone. But then we're only getting about 30 to 35%. So it's that 10 to 15%. And if you look at the way that the Senate is mapped out, you look at the way the Electoral College is, I mean, Biden won by 7 million votes, but I mean, to be honest, it was a handful of states and under 100,000 votes that changed the election. And a lot of it was rural communities. And scary stat for me is by 2040, 70% of the American population is going to be in 15 states. And so that means 70% of the population is going to have 30% of the senators, whereas 30% of the population is going to have 70% of the senators. And where's the Democratic ground game right now to prepare for 2040?
So JD, I hope ruralvote.org works because I know that the Democratic leadership ain't gonna do it. They have no plan at all. Their plan is lambs to the slaughter. And so, JD, let me bounce an idea off you. I think that the Democrats are getting killed in the rural areas because they're led by corporate Democrats and they do a corporate agenda. And what would work in rural areas is economic populism. I'm keeping it real. Social issues on the left are going to be a much harder sell in rural areas, right? But if you go and tell people you're for higher wages and you're for healthcare for everybody, well, you definitely got a fighter's chance. But the problem is our guys at the top suck and they don't agree with that. They just don't. They work for their corporate donors. So the Democratic leadership is selling us out. And they're the reason we're getting killed in rural areas. What do you think about that?
I mean, you're preaching to the choir for me because I completely agree with that. But one of the things that I'm extremely excited about, and one of the things I ran on was enforcing our antitrust laws and just being anti-monopoly. I think it's one of the biggest issues that we should be at the forefront on. And last Friday's executive order by the Biden administration, I thought was remarkable. It's the first time in my generation we've had an administration take on the concentration of economic power. Now that's a start. And I'll say I have a lot of folks who are farmers and ranchers for Trump that were retweeting me during my campaign. And I put a lot out because that executive order was such, I feel, historic. Now, is that solve everything? Absolutely not. Do I want Congress to push and go far more? Absolutely. But it is a pivotal moment, I feel. And you see what with the FTC, they're ruling last week too. When we put quality people like so many, we have a progressive movement happening right now, especially in the antitrust area. And I think if I'm a Democrat running, no matter where you're at, economic justice and antitrust should be at the forefront, and we'll get voters from across the aisle.
Yeah, so by the way, that executive order, and I criticize Biden all the time, including in this interview, but the executive order also preserved net neutrality. So it really was a rare, excellent move by Biden. And those are the things that you got to get out. And by the way, in terms of antitrust, my only slight difference there is that I don't think that people understand the difference between antitrust or monopolies, and I don't think they get into those details. I just think they hate big business, and nobody's ever told them on the Democratic side. We were the ones against big business in the first place. The Republicans love big business. Now Tucker Carlson is out there pretending that they hate big business. No, they serve big business. But of course, Democratic leaders, as always, will not make that case because most of their funding comes from big business. So I think that's the dynamic at hand. All right, JD.
But if there's ever a moment now for the Democratic establishment to really change the narrative, look at the campaign finance reform stuff. Look at how much money from grassroots donors went to Senate candidates last time. So absolutely, the Democrats, if they really want to meet the moment right now, they would really push for a lot of these things and get it passed in the House and Senate.
All right, ruralvote.org. We'll put the links down below. JD Schulten, excellent progressive from the heartland, fighting as he always does. Thank you, JD. We appreciate it.
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks for watching The Young Turks. Really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.